Hello, YouTube. So I've never done a video like this before, but I'm gonna take a crack at it. Um, Trent Reznor, who's one of my favorite musicians ever, um, released a streaming album, or it's up for streaming. It's not fully out yet. Yesterday, and if it's still there, it should be on Pitchfork. If it's still there, I'll post a link to it. Otherwise, I'll try and find some YouTube clips and such and put them in the description. The band is called How to Destroy Angels. It's his first post Nine Inch Nails endeavor, and it's with his wife and a few frequent collaborators with Nine Inch Nails. The record is entitled Welcome Oblivion, and How to Destroy Angels released two EPs previously, but this is their first proper full-length record. This is actually the first, we could say again, proper record that Trent Reznor has released in a really long time, since year zero with Nine Inch Nails. I mean, after that you had Ghosts, which was a 4-disc instrumental thing. Then you had The Slip, which was 7 tracks, I think, and it was really more of an EP. Then How to Destroy Angels, the 2 EPs, and 2 soundtracks, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Social Network, which he won an Oscar for. Now, so he's been very busy. He's done stuff in the past few years, but this is his first, proper record that he's done in a while. And this record is breathtaking. This is just first impressions. I've listened to it twice. Once I actually was really listening to it, and once I was on the way to work. And this is something very different for him, I think. A few people have said that have criticized it for being safe. I completely disagree. I mean, the thing about Nine Inch Nails, right? The game that Nine Inch Nails kind of played is that the structure of the music was, generally speaking, there are a few exceptions, but there were generally pop songs, and vocals, and there were also lots of live sounds happening. Even if they were processed to ship, there were lots of live sounds. This record is really has maybe one track in a standard verse chorus pop form. So the forms are much more they flow into themselves much more, and they flow into the next track. This record flows very well. Probably better than anything that Trent Reznor has put out since maybe The Fragile. I also have to say that the production on this record is probably the coolest production since maybe The Downward Spiral, actually. Year Zero had some really cool moments on it, but The Downward Spiral, like front to back, is really just amazingly creative and kind of crazy production. This record is amazingly produced, and it's a very experimental record, and there's a game kind of going on throughout the record. If I'm hearing it, I don't know if they necessarily intended it this way, but this is how I'm hearing it. Almost every track from front to back, the thread that runs through the record is that front and center what you have is a punchy, bass-heavy pulse. And it's usually very driving, very forward-driving. There are only a few times in the record that it really sits back into a groove. But it's very, it pushes forward, right? And it's the center around which everything else orbits. And you have this, as a result, you have, it's never, cliche techno 4 on the floor or something, but you have a very well structured percussive is probably the key word for this record. Very percussive center that grounds everything, and because it has that grounding, everything else that goes on in the track can get as crazy and wild and collaged um, as he wants it to. Now that's not to say there's plenty of very lush, there's plenty of very pretty moments on the record. Strings and Attractors leaps to mind as a particularly beautiful example of that. Um, but in general, like that center, that very harsh driving, pushing center is what allows him to have everything else orbit around it. Um, and yeah, that's the game that kind of goes throughout. And that pulse also does different things. So like in Ice Age, for instance, which is one of the earlier tracks, the pulse is made in what sounds like really plucky strings in the high end, but it's not. So it changes register, but it's still there. Also, I think that this is primarily an instrumental record. I don't think that it's proper to think of this as a pop record, though there are plenty of vocals on it. A lot of the vocals are really far in the background and probably purposefully uh, indecipherable. They're just part of the texture, and I think it's a really beautiful effect. Um, there's maybe only a few moments on the record where the vocals are really front and center, which is sort of a signature of pop music, particularly in the past 10 years. So there's no, like, that front and centerness of the vocals is more or less absent throughout the record, and it's such a breath of fresh air for me personally. I like to be able to hear the sound. I like the music, right? Um, there are a few moments that reminded me of groups like Autechre, um, but much more not nearly as cold as Autechre, but there are a few moments that remind me of it. There are a few moments that remind me of uh, Tom York's solo record, The Eraser, um, and some moments too that remind me of The King of Limbs. On both of those records, the production plays like an instrument. The production is an active part of the composition, and how things are mixed and how things are produced helps to form the structure of the music. Helps to form. It's an integral part of the composition. That's what I want to say. Um, so yeah, those are just some first reactions on listening to the record. I think it's beautiful. I think it's well done. I think it's probably the coolest thing that Trent Reznor has put out in 10 years. Um, and the other thing too is that I don't think that there's a single actual instrument on the record, but he does a really good job of making that a really difficult statement to make. I'm not sure about that. There might be, but it's definitely very synthetic in the best way possible. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts, and I hope you listen to it. I hope you enjoy it, and have a good day.